Hello again. There was a time when Doctor Who was no more than an entertaining children's programme to watch at Saturday tea time. When it was first being devised, the original idea was that it would be educational and that the TARDIS would visit various historical periods and children would learn about these eras while being entertained. It was to be a visual version of the BBC schools programmes. One of which, by the way, on wireless in the early 60s was called In the Beginning, and that actually featured a time traveller going back to the time of the dinosaurs and observing their habits. It was in the end decided, though, to make it a purely entertaining fantasy, although some of the first episodes were set during the Stone Age, and that was a trial run of trying to show children something about real history. It was, in the end, going to be purely entertaining, though. The first episode was broadcast the day after President Kennedy was assassinated, although there were those who thought that it should have been cancelled out of respect. There was in those days no ulterior motive concealed behind either the plots or the casting. It was simply meant to amuse and sometimes scare the children watching it. This was pretty much the same throughout the 60s and 70s until in the 1980s the series more or less fizzled out before being revived for the new millennium in 2005. Somewhere down the line it was decided that instead of being just entertainment, Doctor Who should also be used to educate children and young people, just as had been planned back in 1963. They were not to be educated about anything useful, though, like the Wars of the Roses or the Stone Age, but rather about what attitudes and opinions are desirable in the 21st century. There was no secret about this. The idea was that when the past was visited, black people and Indians would be cast in roles that they would not have occupied at that time, so that children and young people would learn how it could have been in Britain and be shown what Russell T Davies thought was a better version of the past, one which was, if you like, more up to date. That's why an Indian guy was cast as Isaac Newton a little while ago. Then, too, we have to be taught about the correct use of pronouns and not just accept that we have to call boys he and girls she. One recent episode made a point of reminding viewers about this. Homosexuality is another thing which is, it must be emphasised, perfectly normal, even if 98% of the population do not engage in same-sex activity. There was a time when a kiss between two men or two women would have made newspaper headlines, especially if it occurred during a children's television programme, but no more. These days it is practically de rigueur. The problem is, though, that when that's the case, how can you make a same-sex kiss a little more outrageous so that it's not simply taken for granted and that it will actually make young people watching the programme stop and think? The answer is, of course, to make it an interracial same-sex kiss. You see, interracial kisses were once very daring. In 1968, Star Trek made history when Captain Kirk and Uhuru kissed. Obviously, if Doctor Who was to retain the power to make people's eyebrows go up, then something more than just an interracial kiss would be needed, and so the scriptwriters came up with an interracial same-sex kiss, thus breaking two old taboos at once. That would teach children something a lot more valuable than some stuffy old history. There is a slight difficulty, of course, with a scene such as that in Doctor Who, which shows the Doctor kissing a white guy. And that is, if homosexual relationships are rare, which they are, then interracial homosexual relationships are as rare as hen's teeth. The scene consequently looks rather forced, especially as, in a final twist, this kiss takes place in Regency England, at a time when homosexual sex between men carried the death penalty. However, as Russell T Davies, the creator of the latest incarnation of Doctor Who, has said before, his aim is not to show the past as it was, but as it should have been. In other words, in actual 1830 in England, there would not have been black men present at a grand ball, and two men would certainly not have been kissing in public. But this is England as Russell T Davies thinks that it should have been, so he's remodelling the past. I've been a great fan of Doctor Who over the last 60 years or so, and thought it might be interesting to see how it was originally considered as a programme to educate children about the past, and has now somehow mutated into a way of teaching us not about the past, but rather about an alternative universe where Britain was very different both ethnically and in the mores relating to sexuality. I find this quite an intriguing concept.